Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to kick off a new series on this channel, and I want to start breaking down style aesthetics and different vibes that you can kind of go for. And the reason I think this can be really helpful is because as you're building out your style, essentially our clothing reflects an image and it reflects a story and it kind of tells that story. And so choosing things that align with the aesthetic you're going for can be really helpful as you're building out your style. So I want to start breaking down some pretty common ones. And definitely feel free to leave some recommendations in the comments if there's any you want me to dive into in particular. And in today's video, I want to start things off with the coastal chic aesthetic. This is like that coastal grandma, the Nancy Meyers vibes, and also things that just feel very grounded, very earthy, but also very beachy, but in a very put together way. It's one of my personal favorites and something that I like to tap into, especially during the spring and the summer. So let's get started. So let's start off by going over kind of what this whole vibe is about and kind of the breakdown and what we can think of when we're thinking of this aesthetic. So when we start looking in the direction of this coastal chic aesthetic or this coastal grandmother, this kind of like Nancy Meyers vibe, it's something that feels equal parts unattainable and grounded at the exact same time. There's something very ethereal about all of it, I think because we're talking about the ocean and then a lot of the colors associated with it, which we'll get to in just a minute. And that's also grounded by the essentials, the fabrics, and how things are put together. So things that feel very comforting, but also very, very chic. And I think it's a beautiful juxtaposition. It's one of the reasons why I come back to it over and over again. I think finding things that are really beautiful and really put together, but then dressed down ever so slightly or worn in a way that's truly personal, it just creates a really well-balanced outfit and something that I think is a really great way to build out your style because it's very accessible and very functional. And as you know, I think functionality is so essential. It's one thing to have a really great outfit, but if you're not comfortable in that outfit, chances are you won't reach for it, and ultimately your personal style will fall flat because you're going to end up with a closet full of things that you never reach for. And this is very much the opposite. Now, another key part of this whole aesthetic is definitely a nautical influence and things that feel like you could definitely wear them either on the boat or adjacent to a boat. And when I talk about this specifically when it comes to this whole vibe, it's going to be slightly less literal. So we have kind of a scale and we have a nautical scale, if you will, and rather than things that are exactly on the money, so like an anchor detailing or something like a rope detailing, this is going to feel slightly more abstract. So it's going to feel like things that could be adjacent to a boat or again worn on a boat. Things like lighter colors, things like light soles on your shoes, things that feel like they would be practical in the weather on a boat. So maybe things like a rain jacket, things like boots that are going to work really well if you have to get wet, and things that just feel very, again, nautical and New England-esque. And the reason why that's an important distinction here is because as soon as you move into very literal nautical, I think you move into a different aesthetic. And for this one in particular, you want to kind of live in that more abstract essence and kind of lean into that feeling of someone who doesn't need to go over the top with this nautical influence because they live right there by the water, or maybe they're on a boat regularly. And leaning into that, I think, is again such a beautiful way to play with it. It doesn't feel over the top, and as a result, I think is a lot more flexible. You can wear that, of course, in an environment that's going to be near a boat, on a boat, by the beach, but also you can wear that very comfortably in a city as well and easily dress those pieces up. And I think that's the beauty of, again, leaning into this aesthetic in particular. Now, as with any time that you're actually going to build an outfit or work on your wardrobe, you need to think about the colors that you're going to wear. And having a color palette is one of my favorite things about getting dressed, and also I think one of the things that's most essential when it comes to mixing and matching. I talk about color all the time on this channel for that very reason. And when it comes to an aesthetic, I think that color really helps us speak that language and really get that point across. When we look at color, we often feel emotion, and color is often tied to emotion, and as a result speaks its own language. So if you're wearing one color over another, you're essentially saying two different things. So again, when we think about this whole vibe, we're thinking about things that feel relaxed. They also feel very classic, very sophisticated, very polished, but also again a little bit beachy and a little bit nautical influence. So as a result, you can really start leaning into colors that feel that way. In my personal style course, I devote an entire section to color and specifically understanding these words and really starting to figure out the ones that you want your colors to speak for you. So if you're interested in that, I'll link that down below for you. But essentially for here, I want to include the chart for you so you can take a look. And essentially you want to pick the colors that speak the language that you're going for. So we're going to look for things like white and off-white, things that feel like the beach beach or sand. So a lot of those really soft tan colors are so beautiful for this. And then also as we move into, again, more of that ocean vibe, you want things that are going to be like those soft sea greens. You can darken them up ever so slightly. If you think of as the ocean progresses or as greenery progresses at the beach and throughout the year, you can dip a little bit darker. It wouldn't go too deep because everything kind of lives in the lighter spectrum for this. And then also things like all of the blues. So every shade of blue, and I think that goes from really light blue all the way to really deep navy. And the reason for that is I think that blue is a lot more versatile than we like to consider sometimes. And when you think about blue, you can of course go warmer or softer, but if you're wearing a bunch of blue all together or pairing it with those whites and those off-whites, you have a lot more flexibility with the undertone. So I think it's so beautiful to play with for this. And then also things like brown, or again, kind of like off brown. And the reason I say off brown is because we want things that again feel like a little bit like a seashell if you look at some of those darker seashells, or things that feel like the beach would. So things that are going to be a little bit washed out, a little bit sun drenched, so they span a little bit lighter, but then also a little bit deeper as well. But again, nothing too extreme. And specifically here, I would also try to avoid things that feel a little bit too dark. So I wouldn't lean into black, but I would consider gray, and specifically lighter grays all the way to like those mid charcoals. So beautiful for this aesthetic and goes so great with all of those other colors. And then when we think outside of neutrals, I think it's really nice to consider things that look like flowers, but also can feel a little bit more sunny, but again, a little bit soft. So things like peonies, I think of when I think of this aesthetic, things like hydrangeas. So the colors you tend to see with hydrangeas, those soft pinks, those purples are really beautiful. But then also you can consider things like a little bit of soft yellow, because anytime you're looking at the beach or you go to the beach, you'll see these colors pop up occasionally. So if you want to pick a couple of those to bring in as your pops, I think it is so beautiful and really rounds it all out. Now let's go over some of the essential pieces that you can look into adding to your wardrobe if you really want to channel this aesthetic. So like everything that we've talked about, these items are going to really lean into that kind of nautical vibe. They're going to feel a little bit beachy. They're also going to feel very classic, very sophisticated, but also really grounded, down to earth, and relaxed. And also a little bit flexible. You can easily dress them up or down. So some of the main pieces when I think of this aesthetic for me personally are definitely sweaters. I think anytime you're by the ocean, having things that you can layer on and then take off is really essential. And so for sweaters, I think going for things like cable knit is really beautiful, and also things like cotton sweaters, whether that's a traditional crew neck or something that's got a little bit of a higher collar, kind of like those roll neck styles that we see a lot. And then also when it comes to bottoms, I think it's really nice to have a great pair of like chino pants. They don't have to be literal chinos, but they should be something that feels kind of like cottony and a little bit, again, more relaxed and lived in, but something that doesn't have too much distressing or things going on, so that you could very easily, again, wear that a little bit more formally. You could add heels instead of sandals. And then also I think a great pair of jeans, something that again is a little bit more lived in, something that feels vintage, and maybe is vintage, is really great to consider here. And something that's like a mid to a lower rise, nothing too high rise. I think the higher the rise, the more kind of buttoned up and formal it feels, and you again want something a little bit in the middle and more of that sweet spot. And then I also think it's really nice to have at least one great dress, and specifically something that you can wear a little bit more cooler and warmer. So something that can bridge again that gap. You can wear it more comfortably in the summer or like the spring, but then also you can add boots or you can layer a jacket over it for something that feels a little bit cooler as we move into the fall and then maybe the beginning of a winter, depending on where you live. I also think a great pair of linen pants is essential for this aesthetic, and something that you can wear a little bit looser, so kind of like a wider leg, and whether that's full length to the ground or a little bit cropped is totally up to your preference. And if you're unsure about where to start specifically, I think going for a lighter color is great. Something like white, maybe a soft off-white, or something that's even a little bit more like those light tans. Those are incredibly versatile and really functional. I also recommend having at least one really beautiful flowy top, and specifically something that's going to match the pants, those linen pants that I mentioned, and you can wear those together for a monochromatic outfit that feels really beautiful and gives you a great foundation that you can again dress up or down. And then I also think that having either a straw bag or a great canvas tote is wonderful, and it really just rounds it all out. And so definitely play around with this. Consider these as like a starting point, but always tailor this to what you personally love to wear. So I'm going to link to the Pinterest board that I created specifically for this aesthetic down below for you. I pulled a bunch of images that I showed throughout this video, and hopefully that can be inspiration for you as you go about this if you're interested in this aesthetic. Definitely let me know if there's any others you want me to explore. I think that by exploring an aesthetic or the language of clothing and the language of color, it can be a really helpful way to build out your wardrobe and really figure out your personal style. So I would love to know any requests that you have, and I will definitely add those to my list. And like always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Have a great day.